I stared at the phone screen, my hands trembling. The notification glowed in the darkness of my bedroom. Emma, paints. Dreams started following you. My daughter Emma had been dead for 16 years. I know how that sounds. Crazy. Impossible. The desperate delusion of a grieving father who never learned to let go. But I'm telling you this happened, and by the end, you'll understand why I needed to share it. Emma died on October 14th, 2009. She was 16 years old, bright-eyed, full of dreams about art school. She wanted to be a painter, spent every spare moment with a brush in her hand, covering canvases with colors I didn't have names for. My wife Linda used to joke that Emma saw the world in shades the rest of us couldn't perceive. The accident happened on a Friday. Her junior class was taking a field trip to the Portland Art Museum, 3 hours north from our home in Eugene, Oregon. The bus never made it. A semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel on I-5, crossed the median, hit them head-on. 4 students died. Emma was one of them. They told us the impact was instantaneous, that she didn't suffer. That's what they always say, isn't it? Like it somehow makes the horror more bearable. Linda held my hand at the hospital when they asked us to identify the body. I'll never forget that white sheet, the way my legs gave out when they pulled it back. Her face was bruised, swollen, but it was her, my little girl. Her paint-stained fingers were finally still. We buried her on a Tuesday. Gray skies, rain. The kind of day that makes you believe the whole world is mourning with you. Linda picked a plot under an oak tree because Emma loved to paint trees. I remember standing there, watching them lower her casket, thinking my life had ended too. I just hadn't stopped breathing yet. Linda left me 2 years later. Not because she stopped loving me, she said, but because every time she looked at me, she saw Emma's eyes looking back. I had Emma's green eyes, her stubborn chin. Linda couldn't heal when the wound kept reopening every morning across the breakfast table. I understood. Hell, I could barely look in the mirror myself. That was 14 years ago. I've lived alone since then, in the same house where Emma grew up, where her bedroom sits untouched, her paintings still on the walls, her Instagram account frozen in time at 247 followers, and endless photos of sunset paintings and coffee cups and silly selfies with her best friend Kayla. I kept her Instagram password. I know, it's morbid. But once a year, on her birthday, I log in, just to see her face in those photos, to read the comments from friends who've moved on with their lives while my daughter stayed 16 forever. It's torture, but it's also the only time I feel close to her anymore. That's what I was doing on October 14th, 2025. Emma would have been 32, probably married, maybe with kids of my own grandchildren I'd never meet. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, opened my laptop, typed in her password, paint the sky, 2009. The account loaded, and that's when I saw it. 3 new notifications, all from the past week. My heart stopped. Emma, paints. Dreams started following you. Emma, paints. Dreams liked your photo. Emma, paints. Dreams sent you a message. My vision blurred. This had to be a hacker, some sick joke, one of those bots that scrapes dead people's accounts. But my hands moved on their own, clicking the message. I know this sounds insane, and you probably won't believe me, but I keep having dreams about you. Dreams so vivid I can smell your coffee in the morning. I paint what I see in these dreams. I don't know who you are, but something tells me I need to find you. The message was sent 4 days ago. The profile picture showed a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint smudges on her cheek, standing in front of a canvas. She looked about 30. She had Emma's green eyes. I slammed the laptop shut, stumbled back from the table. The whiskey glass fell, shattered on the kitchen floor. This couldn't be real. This was grief playing tricks, or worse, some elaborate scam targeting the father of a dead girl. But those eyes. I spent the next 3 hours pacing, drinking, telling myself to delete the message and forget it. When dawn broke, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at that profile picture. Finally, I typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came within minutes. She was online, waiting. "My name is Sam. I'm an artist in Portland. I know you don't know me, but I've been having these dreams for months now. Dreams about a little girl painting sunsets, a yellow house with blue shutters, a man who smells like coffee and sawdust. The dreams feel like memories, but they can't be mine. I've had amnesia since I was 16. The room tilted. Portland, 16 years ago. The accident. What happened to you? I typed, my fingers numb. Car accident, 2009. I don't remember anything before waking up in the hospital. The couple who found me by the highway became my foster parents. They said I was wandering, injured, with no ID. No one ever claimed me. They named me Samantha, raised me as their own. But lately, these dreams, they're so real. I started painting them, and somehow, I found this account. The girl in these photos, she's in my dreams too. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. This was impossible. We identified Emma's body. We buried her. I stood at her grave every year on her birthday. But what if we were wrong? The accident was horrific. 4 girls died. The bodies were badly damaged. What if, in the chaos, in the trauma, the hospital mixed them up? What if they showed us the wrong girl, and we were too destroyed to notice? What if Emma survived, and we buried someone else's daughter, while mine wandered away with a head injury, lost and alone? Can you send me a photo? I typed. A clear one of your face. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I opened the attachment with shaking hands. She was standing in what looked like a warehouse studio, natural light streaming through tall windows, paint-splattered overalls, hair in that messy bun. But it was her face that stopped my heart, the slope of her nose, the curve of her smile, the way her eyebrows arched when she looked at the camera, exactly like Emma did in 1,000 photos I'd memorized over 16 years. This wasn't someone who looked similar. This was my daughter. Where are you? I typed. I need to see you. She sent an address. Northwest Portland, the Pearl District. An artist collective called the Lighthouse Studios. I was in my truck within 10 minutes, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Eugene to Portland. Normally a peaceful drive I'd made 100 times, felt like crossing into another dimension. Every mile, my brain screamed this was crazy, a setup, a delusion. But those eyes, Emma's eyes. I pulled into Portland just after noon. The Lighthouse Studios occupied a converted warehouse near the river, all exposed brick and enormous windows. Young people in paint-covered clothes sat outside, smoking, laughing. I felt ancient, out of place, terrified. Inside, the smell of oil paint and turpentine hit me like a memory. Emma's art studio in high school smelled exactly like this. A woman with purple hair sat at a desk covered in sketches. I'm looking for Sam, I said, my voice hoarse. She pointed toward a hallway. Studio 12, second floor. My legs felt like lead climbing those stairs. Each step brought me closer to either a miracle or the cruelest disappointment of my life. The hallway was lined with studios, music and voices drifting from behind closed doors. Studio 12's door was open. She had her back to me, standing in front of an enormous canvas, brush in hand. Her hair caught the afternoon light, auburn shot through with gold, just like Emma's. Sam? I said. She turned, and time stopped. It was her face. Older? Yes. Laugh lines I'd never seen, a small scar above her left eyebrow. But those eyes, that mouth, the way she tilted her head when she was uncertain, it was all Emma. You came, she whispered. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. 16 years of grief, of guilt, of endless what-ifs crashed over me like a wave. I wasn't sure you would, she continued, setting down her brush. I know how crazy this sounds. I'm probably just some stranger who happens to look like someone you lost, and these dreams are just coincidence. And, Emma, I breathed. She froze. What? Your name was Emma. Emma Catherine Harper. You were born on October 14th, 1993, at Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene. You had a birthmark on your left shoulder blade shaped like a butterfly. You hated mushrooms, but loved olive pizza. You wanted to go to the Rhode Island School of Design. Your favorite color was the exact shade of sky right before sunset, And you spent 3 years trying to mix the perfect paint to match it. Her face had gone white. How do you... Because I'm your father. The words hung in the air between us. She stared at me, her green eyes, Emma's eyes, filling with tears. That's impossible, she whispered. I died in that accident. They told my parents. She stopped, clutched the table behind her. The couple who raised me, they said I was found wandering. That no one claimed me, that I had no family. We identified a body, I said, my voice breaking. At the hospital, they showed us a girl, told us she was yours. She was in the accident, they said. We were in shock, devastated. We saw what we expected to see. We buried her. We mourned you for 16 years. But I'm alive, she said, wonder and horror mixing in her voice. You're alive. We stood there, two strangers and a father and daughter separated by 16 years and an impossible mistake, neither knowing how to bridge the gap. I have photos, I said finally, pulling out my phone with trembling hands. Of you. From before. I showed her Emma's Instagram, photo after photo of her at 15, 16, grinning at the camera, covered in paint, posing with Kayla, holding up canvases. Sam sank into a chair, scrolling through them, tears streaming down her face. I remember, she whispered. Not clearly, not like memories, but like dreams. This yellow house, a woman with dark hair singing in the kitchen, a man teaching me to use a power saw. These feel real. They are real, I said, my throat tight. That was your mother, Linda. She couldn't handle the grief. We divorced. But she loved you so much, Emma. We both did. Don't call me that, she said suddenly, looking up. I'm sorry. I know that's who I was, but I've been Sam for 16 years. Sam is who I know how to be. It hurt, like a knife between my ribs, but I understood. Okay, Sam. She wiped her eyes, looked at me with such intensity I had to glance away. If this is true, if I really am your daughter, then whose grave have you been visiting all these years? The question I'd been avoiding. I don't know. Another girl from the accident, I suppose. They told us 4 students died. Maybe in the chaos, the trauma, the bodies got mixed up. Maybe another family has been mourning you while we mourned their daughter. That's horrific. Yes. We sat in silence. Outside, the city hummed with afternoon traffic, people living normal lives where daughters didn't come back from the dead and fathers didn't lose 16 years to a hospital's mistake. I paint dreams, Sam said finally. Dreams of things I shouldn't remember. A yellow house with blue shutters. A kitchen with sunflower curtains. A tree fort in the backyard. Are those real? Yes, I whispered. All of it. You grew up in that house. Your mother planted those sunflowers. I built that tree fort when you were 8. She stood abruptly, paced to the window. I need proof. Real proof. Not just photos and stories. I need to know for certain. DNA test, I said immediately. We can do a DNA test. She nodded, still not looking at me. And if it's true, if I really am Emma Harper, then what? I didn't have an answer. How do you rebuild a relationship with someone who's your daughter but doesn't remember you? How do you recover 16 years? How do you explain to the world that you buried the wrong girl? One step at a time, I said. First, we know for sure. Then we figure out the rest. She turned back to me, and in her eyes, I saw Emma, my little girl who used to paint at the kitchen table while I made dinner, who would dance around the living room to songs she made up, who hugged me goodnight every single night, until the night she didn't come home. Okay, she said. Let's find out. The DNA test took 3 days to process. 3 days where I stayed in a cheap motel near the river, barely sleeping, living on coffee and denial. Sam, I couldn't bring myself to call her Emma yet, agreed to meet me each day. We talked, carefully, like 2 people walking across a frozen lake, testing each step. She told me about the life she'd built. The couple who found her, Frank and Marie Chen, were salmon fishermen from Astoria. They'd been driving back from Portland when they saw her on the side of I-5, stumbling, bleeding, disoriented. They took her to the hospital, but she had no ID, no memory. When no one claimed her after 3 months, They fostered her, eventually adopted her. They were kind, she said. Are kind. They gave me a home, supported my art, never pressured me to remember. But there was always this gap, you know? This sense that I was living someone else's life. I told her about Emma, about the girl she'd been. Bright, stubborn, endlessly creative. How she used to narrate stories to herself while painting. How she'd wanted to save every stray animal in the neighborhood. How she'd taught herself guitar but only knew 3 chords. I still only know 3 chords, Sam said with a sad smile. You play guitar? Yeah. I don't know why, but it feels natural, like muscle memory. Small pieces clicking into place. A puzzle I'd thought was finished, revealing itself to be incomplete all along. On the 3rd day, I got the email. I sat in my motel room, staring at my phone, unable to open it. This was the moment. Either my daughter was alive, or I was a desperate old man clinging to a coincidence. I called Sam. I got the results. Don't tell me over the phone, she said quickly. Meet me at the studio. 30 minutes later, we sat across from each other in her paint-splattered workspace. My phone between us on the table, like a bomb we were both afraid to defuse. I'm scared, she admitted. If it's true, my whole life is a lie. If it's not, then I'm just a girl who happens to look like your dead daughter, and we're both going to be devastated. I know. Open it. I opened the email. Read the first line. Read it again. Looked up at her, tears already streaming down my face. 99.9% probability of paternal match. Her hands flew to her mouth. She made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. I'm her. I'm really Emma. You're really my daughter. We sat there crying. 2 people who'd been lost finding each other across 16 years of darkness. She stood first, hesitant, then crossed to me. I stood too, and she fell into my arms the way Emma used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. I'm sorry, I whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm sorry I believed you were gone. I'm sorry for every birthday, every Christmas, every moment you were alone. You didn't know, she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. How could you have known? But I should have. That's what haunted me. A father should know, should feel it in his bones when his child is still alive in the world, calling out for him. The next weeks were a blur. I hired a lawyer. We contacted the hospital, demanded answers. What we discovered was worse than we'd imagined. The accident had been chaos. 4 girls dead, 2 critically injured, all around the same age, all with similar injuries from the impact and fire. In the confusion, in the overwhelming trauma of that night, someone had made a mistake. Tags were switched, bodies were misidentified. My Emma had been listed as Jane Doe, possible runaway when she'd been found later on the highway, while another girl, Jessica Morrison, had been identified as Emma Harper. Jessica's parents had never known. For 16 years, they'd been visiting Emma's grave, mourning the daughter they thought they'd lost, while their real daughter was buried in Eugene under my daughter's name. The hospital offered settlements, apologies, their lawyers scrambling to contain the nightmare. But how do you compensate for 16 years? How do you apologize for stealing someone's entire childhood? I had to tell Linda. That phone call was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Emma's alive, I said, and listened to silence, then sobbing, then rage, then grief all over again. She flew up from California the next day. The reunion between Linda and Emma, Sam, our daughter, who was both and neither, was beautiful and broken. Linda touched her face like she was afraid she'd disappear. Sam cried and apologized for not remembering her. They held each other and mourned the years they'd lost. We had to tell the Morrisons, too. That was worse. I went with the lawyer to their home in Portland suburbs, stood in their living room, and shattered their world all over again. The girl you buried wasn't your daughter, I said, and watched their faces cycle through disbelief, horror, anger. I'm so sorry. She's been alive all this time. Mrs. Morrison collapsed. Mr. Morrison just stared at me with hollow eyes. You're saying we mourned the wrong girl? That Jessica is out there somewhere? No, I said gently. I'm saying Jessica is the one we buried, under my daughter's name. Emma survived, but Jessica didn't. I'm so sorry. They wanted to hate me. I could see it. But we were both victims of the same impossible mistake. Eventually, we agreed to have Jessica's body exhumed, reburied under her own name. The Morrisons could finally lay their real daughter to rest. It was a small mercy in an ocean of pain. Sam met them once. It was her idea. She wanted to apologize, though she had nothing to apologize for. Mrs. Morrison hugged her, cried, told her she was glad at least one daughter had survived that horrible night. Mr. Morrison couldn't speak, just nodded and turned away. Through it all, Sam and I tried to build something. Not the father-daughter relationship we'd lost. That was gone forever, but something new. She came to Eugene, saw the yellow house, her old bedroom. She stood in front of her childhood paintings, touched them with trembling fingers. I painted these? You did. You were so talented, even then. She met Kayla, her old best friend, now a nurse with 3 kids. Kayla sobbed when she saw her, kept touching her face like she was a ghost. They talked for hours, Kayla filling in pieces of a life Sam couldn't remember. Slowly, fragments came back. Not memories exactly, but feelings. The smell of Linda's perfume triggered something. The taste of olive pizza made her smile without knowing why. The view from the tree fort felt like home. I don't know if I'll ever fully remember, she told me one evening, sitting on the porch of the yellow house, watching the sunset. Is that okay? More than okay, I said. You're here. You're alive. That's more than I ever hoped for. Do you want me to be Emma again? To move back? To try to reclaim that life? I thought about it, really thought about it, about the daughter I'd lost and the woman she'd become without me. No, I said finally. I want you to be whoever you are. Sam, Emma, someone in between. You've built a life, a career. You have parents who love you. I don't want to erase that. But you're my father. I am. And I'll be in your life as much as you want me to be. But I don't get to claim 16 years I wasn't there for. We start from here. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky turn the exact shade she'd spent years trying to capture. 6 months later, Sam had a show at a gallery in Portland. Paintings from her dreams, she called it. Fragments of a life remembered through color and light. I stood in that gallery, surrounded by images of the yellow house, sunflower curtains, a little girl with paint in her hair, and understood that art had saved her. When her mind couldn't hold the memories, her hands had kept them alive. Linda came to the opening. We stood together, divorced but united in our grief and joy and confusion, watching our daughter, Sam, who was Emma, talk to admirers about her work. We lost 16 years, Linda said. We did, I agreed. But we have now. We do. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Sam still called the Chens Mom and Dad, though she'd started calling me Dad too, sometimes, when it felt right. She lived in Portland, visited Eugene once a month. We talked on the phone, texted, slowly learning each other again, for the first time. Some nights, I still visited the cemetery. Not Emma's grave anymore, Jessica's now, with a proper headstone bearing her real name. I left flowers, apologized to a girl I'd never known for burying her under my daughter's name, for making her disappear twice. But mostly, I looked forward to Sam's next show, to dinners where she'd tell me about her art, her life, her dreams, to the miracle of her laughter, her presence, her existence. My daughter died 16 years ago, except she didn't. She survived, lived, grew into someone amazing without me, and somehow, impossibly, she found her way back home. Not through a phone call from beyond the grave, but through dreams painted onto canvas, through the stubborn persistence of memory, even when the mind forgets, through the unbreakable thread that connects a father and daughter across time, across loss, across the impossible. Her name was Emma. Now she's Sam. She's my daughter either way. And she's alive. That's all that matters.